Sunday, August 23rd. We have just started with the new business school. You can join our community at aplusactive.com. We've been working on this course called Intro to AI Agents for Business. Anthony and I had an idea that how do you stay focused when you're learning as an adult? Everyone's stealing your attention. Our idea was that the simplest way would be to have like a shared goal. And that shared goal for the class that we have is to make $100 per day per person with an AI agent. And so that's the goal for our class. But then we're going to have to say, like, how do we actually get there? That's going to be the challenge in our curriculum. How this class will work is through the case study technique. You'll have these lectures which you can watch on your own time, and each lecture will have case studies of who is in our Slack community, and we will go through new business and new product launches for everyone who's in the Slack group, kind of class after class, so that you get that personalized help and you get to learn from each other. There's two foundational skills that you will need in order to be successful. One is business calculus. Now, why does calculus matter? Calculus helps us calculate the rate of change. It's not just did something change, it's to be able to understand how much it changes and which variables are causing the biggest change. What can we expect to be the impact of this? Specifically, we will apply this to understanding time, cost, and risk, how that applies for your professional life and your personal life. Additionally, we will need to go over data literacy. And data literacy will be the topic of today's discussion. So, our goal, as I mentioned, we want to earn $100 per day per person. And we set a foundation for business calculus. You can catch up on the past lectures at thepromptclinic.com. The second that you get there, you're going to see an organization of departments of knowledge that you can just kind of go top to bottom. You can click on each of these. And as you go through the lessons that are organized here, you'll be able to have relevant timestamps that will be able to help you with a lot of this material, because it's highly recommended that you guys, that you write it down somewhere into some repository, whether it is a Google Doc or whether it's your own scratch pad. So to join the community, you will go to aplusactive.com. That's where you can join our community. Now, if you want to be part of the private member group and get your case studies done, as you've seen with Anthony, Kazar, Nicole, the way you'll do that is by joining right over here as a founding member. So today's lecture, I want to go over what is data literacy. And what I will do that is very unique today is I'm going to use my imagination. And when I use my imagination for data, what I will specifically do is I will specifically work based on the ideas of a philosopher. And this philosopher, you may know him, Immanuel Kant. Now, Immanuel Kant has a large number of contributions to civilization. And one of the contributions to civilization that we will talk about later as we continue to build this whole curriculum out is the noumena, the thing in and of itself, and phenomena. I don't even actually fully know how to spell them, so I'm going to be fully honest here. Very strong with numbers, very strong with code. I'm seeing that I have a litany of spelling errors right now. Okay, so what I care to do is I care to talk about, well, why am I giving you this frame? Why would I give you this frame of use your imagination for data literacy? And then why would I write that under here that this is how we would hallucinate reality and create a hologram, right? That seems to be kind of derailing a little bit. So let's go into like why I would bring this up in the first place. So today we're going to talk about data literacy. The live case study example is going to be for myself. What we will do is I have Claude Code. And so I have both Claude Code and I have Codex, which are both working. And so with Claude Code, what I have this doing is I have this working. Let me just update the screen that's being shared so you can see Claude Code briefly. Replace this screen with my window of this. Here we go. So this is Claude Code. This is a terminal, and you'll see inside of here what I'm specifically doing is I'm running an error clustering exercise. So this is what we will be building into. And the reason why this will matter is that we are going to apply this for the class case study. Our class case study for today, as I mentioned, is going to be looking at a user interface and being able to use data literacy to do error clustering so that I can effectively train Claude Code to make a language learning app. Okay, so that's the goal at a very high level. So let's go to data literacy. Like, what is data? Why do we need to understand it? So the first thing that we need to do is we need to understand what is data. Then we will need to understand, well, why does data matter so much? And then why are humans controlled by data? Okay, so now this is where we will enter into the philosophical territory, because when we talk about humanity being controlled by data or like being predicted by data, a lot of people would say, hey, wait a second, no, that can't be possible. So let's go into this a little bit. So the first thing I'm going to do is let's define this. Let's define what is data. So data is a collection of raw, unorganized facts, numbers, symbols, or observations. Okay, well, why does that matter so much? Why is that worth like a whole lecture? Well, data matters when, let's go through a process with data. So we start with data, and then data begins as something that is unorganized, right? That's the thing that characterizes the data. Well, then what happens when data becomes organized? I guess data then turns into information. That's the difference between data and information. Okay, so it looks like we're getting somewhere. Well, once the information gets organized, it gets organized by way of labeling. That's like first, it's labelers and classifications. So labeling and classification. Then what I'm going to say is, okay, well, when does information turn into knowledge? Oh, wait a second. Well, I guess it turns into knowledge and skills when it's applied. Oh, real world data. So now we have we have real world applications, so we can say, oh, hey, was this data true or not? I can now basically apply and assess the truth of the data, its reliability, its integrity. And then when does knowledge turn into wisdom? Well, knowledge turns into wisdom when I not only have data, I organize it with labels, schemas, and classifiers. I then apply and assess that information to see how true it is. That then becomes knowledge. That knowledge then becomes, I guess, a mental map. And so now this comes back to what I'm talking about, the difference between the noumena and phenomena. So let's quickly go into that without derailing this. Let's go into the noumena. That's the word that is going to be missing here. So the noumena, as we'll see it defined here, is This is the gift or what is given. Noumena, as a concept from Immanuel Kant's philosophy, is different than what you're going to see in an AI definition. Immanuel Kant will come to this from a perspective of this is objective reality, the thing in itself that cannot be experienced or directly known through human sensory or perception. Oh, so this would really be like, oh, this is like the source. Oh, shit. Well, actually, now things really start to map to a model of something here. So, source being this final layer that humanity doesn't actually come to. So, we'll have a mental map of how the universe works once we get to wisdom, and once we are the source, there's no more mental map. You are back with the monad. And so, what I'm doing here is I'm presenting a framework where data could effectively lead you to the secrets of the universe, to lead you to the Godhead, right? That's why I said I would use my imagination for this exercise. So, what I'm now going to say is data matters so much because this is required for achieving general intelligence. With AI, we have a goal to achieve general intelligence. And general intelligence would be hey, we got a bunch of data that we took from the internet. We then labeled it and organized it. We then brought in real world experts to then apply and assess the tools through reinforcement learning. And then we are putting this information, these skills, knowledge, and tools into an AI agent. And if it keeps working exceptionally well, and we believe that it has the ability to access the truth, it uses the mental map in the wild. And then it has its own experiences, and then through those experiences it continues to defer on that, but then it continues to add more and more consciousness into itself. So the process for data then becoming general intelligence is quite similar to this pathway that we would see in philosophy. So that's the argument that I'm making. Now comes the next part, which is saying, well, are humans controlled by data? Are humans explained by data? Are human are human behaviors predicted by data? And well, the whole point of investing in AI is to predict behaviors and outcomes so that you can bet and prepare against them. And when we take a look at the economy, we take a look at the economy now, you have, look, there's a poly market ticker right up here. The reason why that exists is because this is how many parts of our biology naturally unfold. So there is something here. I think the simplest, one of the simplest things to mention here is that an LLM is modeled after your brain. It's a neural network. And a neural network, you have nerves, you have a nervous system. So, through understanding the nervous system, we can also understand how our bodies process data as well. We process these signals, and then our body produces chemicals based on that. These chemicals then help us meet the moment by releasing more adrenaline or by releasing other key chemicals like endorphins, oxytocin, these feel good types of hormones. What they do is they help us achieve a state of homeostasis. Something has changed, and now my body must respond to meet the moment. And so, this again is going to be processing data, specifically processing signals, and then knowing which signals to label and what to pay attention to, what to avoid, see how well that serves us, have a mental map of how to operate my life, and continue to go out into the wild and become a wise man. Wow. So it seems like we have a strong enough model of understanding for this. So this is your primer to data literacy. Your primer to data literacy is to say that there is the thing in and of itself in the universe, and then there's the phenomena of what we see. The phenomena is what we observe. That is data. That data then gets organized by labeling, classification, and organizing this into schemas, into drawers. And then that gets applied to the real world through back testing, through human verification. And then you use that in new uncharted territory in the wild and see, does this still work? Because if you can pass that, now you have the keys to wisdom. And then in that final part, from wisdom back into the source, back into the Noumena itself. This will be part of the journey we go on in this cohort. So we have the primer for data literacy. And so we know that, Immanuel Kant is a very big part of this. We know some of this other stuff as well. So I'll remove these from the board for now. Now our job is going to be, we will come back to Claude Code and we will take a look at the application workload that I'm going to work on. And I'm specifically going to use a data technique to cluster and categorize data. So where I am currently at in the process is that not only do I have data, my data currently is organized, and now I'm going to take the knowledge step. I'm going to take this knowledge step and apply and assess the truth. So Claude Code is creating this application so that I would be able to learn both French and Tamil, as we can see here. But what I want to do is I want to start clustering and saying, what's wrong with the applications that Claude is producing? Well, what I would say is what's wrong in how Claude is producing this workload is, I would say, right now I need to be able to describe this with words. So I'm currently being presented a screen. If I click this button right here, I can also see how this will show up on mobile. Now, my first comment is this is my core onboarding screen. And so what I would want to look for is I would want to like have a reference pattern. And so what I probably want to do is I want to have a swipe file for user interfaces for onboarding. So a lot of times other people will organize information and you can see what they've done. And so I'm seeing right here, oh, look, there's a swipe file of someone else doing this. I could click in and learn more. How is it that they are doing this? Now, one of the challenges here is that I am going to see a lot of videos here, and by seeing too many videos, this is just like not going to be helpful for me. So what I know I'm going to need to do is I'm going to comment on like the visuals. So I'm going to say, this lacks visual cues. This is the core focus area in our and so what I'm doing is I'm annotating the application. This is like an advanced technique that you can do with like front-end engineering. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to start annotating what's wrong. So then I'm not constantly going back and forth with Claude. I'm just going to organize all the feedback, cluster it, pass it back all at once, and then it'll do a long pass. Now this is going to take roughly 30 minutes of like me giving it feedback. So I'm going to say, this lacks visual cues. This is the core focus area in our application, and therefore it should take a much larger real estate in the application, in addition to having strong visual cues and animations, ideally that remain true to our instructional design methodology used for this application. Then what I'm also going to do is I'm going to make another annotation inside of here. And so then the annotations come directly over to the side. I can continue working with them. And so what I'm going to say is we should explain the run of the program so that learners understand where they are now, where they will be at the end of the program, and the steps along the way that they will be proud of. Okay, then another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to say, so now I have a slight like kind of bug in how I report this. Well, I guess, oh, look, that works just fine. So what I'll now say is the copywriting must improve. No need to be unnecessarily terse. You can use techniques such as progressive disclosure when we need to share more information. Okay, great. So now that's the first screen. Then I see, the app name, and then I have getting started, 1 out of 3. So I like that. And then I'll take a look at the mobile version of this real quick. Let's say, make this match the copywriting for a course made by an instructional designer. So this is kind of like something that's in my taste level of like, hey, certain, all copywriting shouldn't be done by marketing. Marketing can do a good job of explaining things. However, one of the things that I don't appreciate as much is like when we start making up like fake words and stuff. All right, so now let's come over to the next screen. I'll look at this as the desktop. And so now it's saying like, let's find your starting point. Um, Listen, then pick what you heard. And so I'm going to say, poor use of spacing and sizing. This should style the whole div, and the main action should be unavoidable for getting started with the correct guidance on doing this from A11Y. Okay, now there's the now say it back as this, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight this. And I'm going to say this second step would benefit from progressive disclosure and short feedback loops that engage the user's brain to make them overcome the cognitive load of doing this intake process. So this is a big thing a lot of people don't think about is the onboarding process. So I'm coming back, I'm using this model of like, hey, well, what happens in the real world when I see this, right? So this is part of reinforcement learning. So why no score? So I'm like, so what I'm going to say is this is superfluous. Is there a better, more consistent use for this sidebar area that would benefit desktop and give mobile users a reason to come to desktop. Maybe a section for their own notes, and it can be powered by uh, so now I just put a product idea in that I was kind of interested in. Now let's take a look here. So my agent is starting to make some suggestions as well. So the agent just came in here and said, copy below instructional design standard. The goal is chosen via one word chips. Yeah. So I got to say, like, that makes sense. I'm going to say, use this section again to help the user overcome motivation that will supersede the cognitive load required to complete onboarding. Over here, what I'm going to do, I'm going to say time is a concept that I personally play with a lot. Could we create sprites? So there's something called sprites, like these are design sprites, and so I'm just going to ask it to make those for me. Now keep in mind, like if I was to keep changing this screen size, I'm going to accidentally mutate the DOM, the document object model. So I don't want to do that because that would then impact like how that would just like end up impacting like how this is like rendered and like where it goes. Okay, great. Amazing. Okay. This does not help. Set my plan. I'm going to say this does not help. Two-way sidebar should be repurposed. Okay. I'll look at the mobile version for this as well. And yeah, I think that's fine for now. So now we see my agent is just beginning to come in and start to make its own suggestions. So, you know, let's see. Let's find out of what it's going to say. All right. So let's keep going through this. All right, all cafe. Now that the agent is adding so much in, like now I'm gonna have to read it and dismiss it first. All right, so we have this first one. Oh, okay. Your plan sidebar counts lessons but never states the destination. Yeah, I can accept that. So I can choose to accept the agent's feedback or not. And so like now it's kind of seeing like what I'm saying. And so based on if I accept it or not. So what I will do is I'm going to come back and accept that as well, just so that I can see it. And now look, like it's going in commenting in a couple of areas too. So I will have to review these and then continue to work through this. Okay. The single start lesson card is the entire point of the screen, yet occupies under a quarter of the page. Yeah, that is correct. Floating in large empty can. Yeah, that's correct. That's what I'm saying. The lesson description on the learner's first ever visit is internal method jargon. Yeah, that's fair. So remove. This is day one. Um, so time and days should have sprites and maybe a character world. Cool. The core act of pressing play and listening, but the play control is a small, thin, ringed glyph side of a skip ahead. Yeah, it's pointing that out as a problem. Say, much more effective sidebar here compared to earlier onboarding sidebars. However, I think the harness, that the AI harness idea I mentioned with Bonsai 27B via web GPU and skills context baked in, similar to how Notebook LM is an effective harness for learning. Amazing. Say remove. Listen one of two. Not helpful outside of my dev environment. Okay. Keep this consistent or update the style of how this is rendered. Yeah, keep this consistent or update the style of how it's rendered to make this seem like it's a game mode. All right, now we'll take a look at the mobile version for this. Mobile version, I guess the only thing is going to say mobile white space like this hurts the UX because the user wants no scrolling when in this part we should focus on sequentially moving via swiping and then occasionally and sparingly try to do a deeper dive via scrolling on a single page, but only when it's important to leave a lasting impression to continue learning. Cool. All right, this captures it for me. All right, now we see like the agent continues to go through and say more stuff. So the cover English, cover France reveals controls that Are the methods signature gradual yet tiny chips identical? Yeah. Um, signal informational text with no action, um, using a call out if I need a hint to work with a learning UX. Okay. Now, this is a feature where specifically you want to have like the two fingers reading together. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say the parallel spread is designed for the user using their fingers to read both at the same time and process the visual information while hearing it or trying to say it themselves. Okay. I think that works. I don't think I need to go too much more into that. Now this is the covered version of doing this. So now I'm gonna have to say like we need a better way to do this because this could easily confuse the user. Um, yeah, given the finite states and not derailing while trying to figure this out. Awesome. Okay, we'll go to the next one. Now this is going to do like a comprehension check, and it will look like this. That's talking about sizing and spacing, which I like. Now what I'm going to have to say is that the parallel technique needs to consider what mobile application development would do to handle porting our instructional design theory about parallel reading between two languages by pointing your finger to read. But is that really tenable for mobile? Okay. So I think that's an important consideration to have. Let's keep moving through. So there's no agent notes here. Repeat right on the speaker's heels. Make this use more space and be a proper decoration for this div. Okay, chunk, your turn, next chunk. Maybe introduce this concept to get buy-in from the learner first because I'm nervous they will get confused. Awesome. See this on mobile. And so mobile's gonna have like the same thing. Cool. Translate into English now. So they'll say this, then you can type or dictate that. I have no things to say about this one, so I like that. Nothing to really say about that one either. Fill in the blank. All right, now a bakery. So now this is doing a situation. There's a bakery. It's 8 a.m. You want a croissant. So use a construction you already own. So now I'm like, hold on. Help them recall prior knowledge and understand what the schema of construction means, and maybe we should have a dedicated wiki for our taxonomy and learning methodology to link back to for learners who, one, get stuck, two, need to go deeper, three, need quick reference on the fly. Okay. Producing your own sentences is a transfer moment, yet the composition input is a plain shallow box with a tiny mic below it. Yeah, that's a fair enough thing. If this is an entity, then if this is an entity, then we should also have sprites for constructions and the specific constructions in our curriculums. So then there is a visual reference for reinforcing learning. So remember, it comes back to reinforcement learning. All right, cool. We have this. Consider where this is placed and the best practices around this placement. Now it's going to be like, all right, the session's done. Before you go, remove that M dash. All right, that's good enough for now. Now, all right. Similar sidebar feedback around utility to be mentioned here. Right. That's a good catch. This just caught that this just got like a day wrong, so I like that. But now like my taste is kind of in here, so I think that's good. Say remove this text. Sidebar lacks utility here. Cool. Oh, now this is cool. So we're kind of going back the other way. I love that. I'm vibing a little bit for sure. Not gonna lie. Like now I feel like this is capturing what it is that I want to say and do. And then I also like that it's picking up a lot of stuff on mobile too. It's placing everything in the right places. So I'm gonna come back real quick. I'm gonna just see like if it put unaddressed feedback in because we just got to 18. So you see like it's gonna come back and like say stuff because it's picking this up. There's like a monitoring that's going on, and so the monitoring then will help it start to be like, oh, this is the feedback that he's putting in, and so now my agent is now getting wise, and so we see like the data literacy is working because we see that Claude Code is just naturally picking this up, and it's beginning to understand. Oh, okay, this is how I should do this. I'm going to use this same thing and then eventually see if I can get Codex to make better user interfaces because that's like right now that's the big thing everyone is complaining about is like Codex is phenomenal with coding but quite terrible with like user interfaces. It's just that it's not going to be a user interface that like is going to really build your brand. It'll be a user interface that like if you just need like lowest common denominator, it can work. So now I'm gonna be like, this is out of place. All right, you read this lesson. You read this in lesson 1. Now say it in French. Um, it's active recall. Say it and do that. This might require changing placement and making this closer to where the user sees this visually. It could require us to only do one phrase at a time, um, and then have them do all 11 and then hit next. And now this is going to be progressive disclosure or potential chunking of exercises. Okay, awesome. Then compare with the canonical line. That's something I say. That's not something they say. Rephrase to be simple. Okay. I'm going to also put this here and say this is out of place. All right, so a lot of people they'll go back and forth with Claude or Lovable for like years and years, and meanwhile I'm like, no, it's like that's not that's not how I like it. Rephrase this to be simple. This does not help the user. Redo this copywriting as an instructional designer. There's a better way to say this for learning. Okay, today start, and then now that's a retrieve again. Sidebar, not helpful. Wrong day. wrong day. And then the agent is going to continue putting, its uh, what it thinks is going to make sense. And then you'll get to a point where now I've done like enough of these where I see these and I have 32 screens to go through right now. So then I have like the setting screens and whatnot, some assessment screens as well, as we see inside of here. What I'll do for right now, is now I'm going to come over to, this is like the journey. And now based on where we are in the journey, like this is where I put a lot of the comments in so far. And I can see based on that, then I can see progress of the failure modes. And now my failure modes are now being clustered. So this is where, we talked about in the lecture, when does information turn to knowledge? So I just took, unstructured data. I then labeled it, classified it by way of using Claude Code. And so now there is, so there are uncategorized pieces of feedback that need to be categorized, but then there's buckets that are being created. So saying missing journey orientation, underweighted focus area, copy being below the instructional design standard, which comes back a lot, anything that's stale or composition. From here, the agent is now going to say, okay, what can I do in these areas? And I'm going to accept what it's saying here. And now I have a lot of uncategorized feedback. And so what I will now be able to do inside of here is now this is my time to say, okay, I put all the feedback in and it has been clustered into Claude. Now I'm going to go back to my prompt and we'll see 35 minutes of taking a break from Claude is going to do wonders. And so this whole time that this is happening, keep in mind, this whole time that this is happening, I have Claude running and there's the annotations. And now I see Claude is coming over here saying we're ready to file. The review is distilled to this, 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 and this. Some feature specifications. So I'm going to say file the feedback, handle the future spec today, and address all the uncategorized feedback as well. Use it all and file issues and plans for dealing with this, and then work to loop to goal to address all the feedback. And I will do another round of review. And then I'll just like hit goal mode on there. So what's happening now is that, so I have a much better way of documenting. These are the mistakes that Claude is making in the first round. It's not like I'm constantly seeing them playing whack-a-mole, working with the document just to have it, I would say just to have it, I don't know. You're gonna work on it for a long time, and a lot of times people will just end up being like, "Oh no," but like it just keeps making the same mistake over and over again. Whereas a human, that doesn't happen as much with humans. Humans do have hubris, without a doubt, but with humans, what's different is that people are able to pick up cues, people work together, people pick up the slack for each other. People also kind of change and they know how to read the room, whereas an AI wouldn't be able to do that. So today we had your data literacy foundation. Your literacy foundation was me proving again that I can just use intuition and my imagination for understanding data. And I presented a framework where what I'm doing is I'm presenting this pipeline of going from data to labeling the data so that it then becomes information, applying the truthfulness of that information against like a real world expert, back testing things against historical facts or present details that then becomes knowledge. Once we then take that knowledge and use that to create mental models, and then we go explore them into the wild, meaning your day to day in production, then if that knowledge continues to work in the wild, you now have wisdom because you have the wisdom to be able to survive and thrive. Then, of course, there's going to be a final stage of like, when do you go from wisdom to being the actual source? But keep in mind, I'm doing the delineation here, and the delineation here that I think is kind of like important to mention is that there's a fine line between, what I'll say up here is phenomena. This is what we can observe. We can observe unorganized data as signals. It happens inside of our body, happens inside of our computers. We then have information when we label things. Is this danger? Is this not danger? We then have knowledge and what our body does. These are nervous system patterns, or these are patterns of how we do things. And so a lot of these times, these patterns will then be these actions based on our reasoning. However, if we get hurt from them, then we'll be like, okay, no, this isn't wise to continue doing. And so when we apply that mental map into the wild, that's when knowledge can become like crystallized wisdom. And so that was the core idea, to explore what is data. Why does this data matter so much? This data matters so much because it helps us understand general intelligence, which helps us understand the secrets of the universe, as well as understanding how to train AI, as we just saw in a live example with Claude Code. And the reason is that human behavior is very aligned with how this system is set up, because humans were always making predictions. We're making predictions on how will someone behave, how will they act, and then what outcomes will come as a result of this. So that's tonight's kind of like mini lecture on data literacy, and then I will apply this a little bit more deeply in tomorrow's lecture. Tomorrow's lecture, I'll talk about, I won a hackathon over the weekend. I won a hackathon for NVIDIA. If you guys are familiar, NVIDIA makes the chips for everything. NVIDIA had a hackathon in New York City, hosted by my friend Soumya Gupta, and I came in first place this weekend. My team name was American Exceptionalism. So tomorrow I'm going to extend data literacy, maybe a little business calculus, into explaining what project I made, why did I make it, why did I choose who I worked with, and how this ties back into AI agents for business. All right, thanks again, guys. I'll see you